Most people think their blood pressure problem happens because of stress, or salt, or bad luck. But after years of sitting with patients and looking at their numbers, I can tell you something that might surprise you. For a lot of people, the real damage isn't happening at dinner or at the doctor's office or late at night. It's happening in the first 20 minutes after they wake up. And almost nobody realizes it. I've watched patients do everything right. They take their pills, they cut back on salt, they walk every evening, and yet their morning numbers stay stubbornly high. And sometimes their doctor increases their medication without ever asking one simple question: what do you actually do in the first 20 minutes after you open your eyes? That's the missing piece. Because your body goes through a hidden shift every single morning, whether you feel it or not. Your heart rate climbs, your blood vessels tighten, stress hormones flood into your bloodstream. This happens to everyone, every day, and for most of your life it causes no harm at all. But if you're over 55, especially if you already have high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease, this same shift can turn into something dangerous. Doctors have a name for it. They call it the morning surge. Here's the part that really gets my attention. Heart attacks and strokes don't happen evenly throughout the day. They cluster in the morning hours more than any other time, and researchers believe the sudden rise in blood pressure right after waking is one of the biggest reasons why. So today I want to walk you through 6 mistakes that quietly make this morning surge worse. Some of these will surprise you. One of them you're probably doing right now without even thinking about it. Another one seems like good advice, but the newest research tells a very different story. Stay with me, because by the end, I'm going to show you a simple morning routine that takes less than 10 minutes and can help protect your heart for the rest of the day. I want to say this clearly before we go any further. I'm not sharing this to scare you. I've sat across from too many frightened patients to ever want to add to that fear. I'm sharing this because almost every mistake we're about to cover has a simple, gentle fix. You don't need new equipment, you don't need a new prescription, you just need to know where to look. And once you know, you can't unknow it. That's exactly how I want you to feel by the end of this video, not afraid, but equipped. Let's get into the first one because it's the one that fools even careful, health-conscious people, and it fooled a patient of mine in a way that genuinely surprised us both. Let me start with something I see almost every single week in my practice. A woman I'll call Diane, 72 years old, came in convinced her blood pressure medication had stopped working. Her home monitor kept showing numbers in the 100s and 50s, sometimes higher, every single morning. She was scared. She thought her heart was getting worse. But when I watched her actually take the reading, I found the real problem in less than a minute. She was measuring her blood pressure the wrong way. I know that sounds almost too simple to matter, but let me explain why it matters so much. Think of a blood pressure cuff like a tiny microphone listening to your blood moving through your arm. If there's noise around that microphone, talking, moving, a crossed leg, an unsupported arm, the reading gets distorted. It's not measuring your true blood pressure anymore. It's measuring your blood pressure plus a pile of extra static. Diane was checking her pressure standing at the kitchen counter, cuff over her sweater sleeve, talking to her husband about breakfast at the same time. Every one of those things pushes the number higher. Research on blood pressure measurement has found that small mistakes like these, wrong cuff size, no rest beforehand, talking during the reading, can raise your numbers by 5 to 10 points, sometimes more. That's not a small error. That's the difference between a normal reading and one that gets you a new prescription you may not actually need. So here's what I want you to do differently, starting tomorrow morning. Before you measure, sit down in a quiet chair with your back supported and your feet flat on the floor. Don't cross your legs. Rest your arm on a table so it sits at the same height as your heart. Empty your bladder first, because a full bladder can raise your reading too. Then just sit quietly for 5 full minutes before you start. No phone, no talking, no television. When you're ready, take 2 readings, about 1 minute apart, and use the average of the two. Write both numbers down or let your monitor's app save them so you and your doctor can see the real pattern over time, not just one number on one day. And one more thing that surprises a lot of people. Not every blood pressure monitor sold in stores is actually accurate. There's a free website called validatebp.org where you can look up your exact monitor model and see whether it has been tested and approved. I always tell my patients, if you don't know whether your device is validated, it's worth 5 minutes to check. You wouldn't trust a scale that hadn't been calibrated in years. Your blood pressure monitor deserves the same respect. Diane switched to this method. Same medication, same dose. Nothing changed except how she measured. Within a week, her morning readings dropped from the 150s into the 130s. Her heart wasn't getting worse. Her measurement was just telling her the wrong story. Have you ever wondered why your reading at the pharmacy machine looks so different from the one you take at home? This is usually why. Different position, different amount of rest beforehand, different arm, sometimes even a cuff that's the wrong size for your arm entirely. A cuff that's too small for a larger arm can squeeze harder than it should and push the number up. A cuff that's too big on a slender arm can do the opposite. It's such a small detail, and yet it changes everything that follows, including whether your doctor decides you need a stronger medication. I'll tell you honestly, this is the mistake that worries me the most as a physician, because it doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects the decisions being made about your care. If your numbers look artificially high because of how you're measuring, you could end up on more medication than you actually need, which brings its own risks, like that blood pressure dropping too low later in the day. And if your numbers look artificially low, a real problem could get missed entirely. Getting this one step right is quietly one of the most powerful things you can do for your own safety. Now, once you're measuring correctly, something else becomes obvious. And this next mistake is one that can genuinely put you at risk for a fall or worse. Here's what almost nobody explains about the moment you get out of bed. When you're lying down all night, gravity isn't working against your blood flow. Blood settles evenly through your body, but the instant you sit up and stand, gravity suddenly starts pulling nearly a pint of blood down toward your legs. Your body has a built-in system to fix this immediately, tiny nerve signals that tell your blood vessels to tighten and your heart to beat a little faster so blood keeps flowing up to your brain. In a younger person, this system reacts in about 1 or 2 seconds. You barely notice it happening. But as we get older, especially with high blood pressure, diabetes, or certain medications, that system can get slow to respond. Doctors call this orthostatic hypotension, which is just a technical way of saying your blood pressure drops too much, too fast when you change position. Think of it like a house with old plumbing. When you turn on the faucet, there's a short delay before the water pressure catches up. That delay in your body is what causes the dizziness, the lightheadedness, the brief feeling that the room is tilting. This matters far more than people realize. Studies following older adults have found that this kind of blood pressure drop upon standing is linked to a higher risk of falls and a higher risk of stroke because of that brief moment when blood flow to the brain drops too low. One large analysis found the risk of death was up to 50% higher in people with this pattern, especially when it goes unrecognized. I think about a man I'll call Robert, 78 years old, who told me he'd fainted getting up to use the bathroom at 5 in the morning. He wasn't dizzy during the day. He felt completely normal by the time he ate breakfast. That's actually very typical. This problem hides in that first minute after waking, and then it seems to disappear, so people brush it off. Certain things make this slow response even more likely, and it's worth knowing whether any of these apply to you. Some blood pressure medications, some medications for an enlarged prostate, and some antidepressants can all make this dip more pronounced. So can dehydration, especially overnight, since we naturally lose fluid through breathing and sweat even while sleeping. Skipping dinner or drinking alcohol in the evening can also make mornings shakier than usual. None of this means you need to stop any of these medications on your own. It simply means this is worth a conversation with your doctor, especially if mornings have felt unsteady for you lately. Here's what I recommend instead, and it takes almost no extra time. When your alarm goes off, don't jump out of bed. Sit up slowly and stay sitting on the edge of the bed for a full 30 seconds to a minute. Let your feet touch the floor, take a few slow breaths, then stand up, and if you can, hold on to something steady, a nightstand, a bedpost, a wall, for the first few seconds. If you ever feel that swimming, lightheaded sensation, sit right back down immediately. Don't push through it. There's another simple trick that surgeons and sleep specialists have studied for people with this issue: raising the head of your bed slightly using risers under the bed frame or a wedge pillow so your upper body is a bit higher than your feet overnight. This can reduce how much your blood pressure drops when you stand in the morning, especially in people who also run high blood pressure while lying flat at night, which is more common than most people think. I know some of you are thinking, this sounds like a small thing to worry about, but let me tell you why I take it so seriously. Research following older adults found that this kind of blood pressure drop upon standing isn't just an occasional annoyance. It's been linked to a higher risk of heart attack, heart failure, irregular heart rhythms, and cognitive problems down the road, not only in people who feel dizzy, but in people who don't feel anything unusual at all. In fact, roughly a third of people with this pattern have no symptoms whatsoever. Their body is struggling silently, and the only way to catch it early is to actually check for it, or to build in that slow, patient transition from lying down to standing up as a simple daily habit. If you've ever felt that quick head rush getting up in the morning, even just once in a while, I want you to take it seriously rather than brushing it off as just getting older. Mention it to your doctor. It's a conversation worth having, and it might change how your medications are managed. So far, we've covered how you measure your pressure and how you move your body in that first minute. But there's a third mistake that happens just a little later, and it involves something almost every one of my patients over 55 reaches for without thinking twice: coffee. I'm not here to tell you to give up your morning coffee. I drink it myself. But there's a timing mistake that quietly works against you, and once you understand it, the fix is incredibly easy. Caffeine is a stimulant. It temporarily narrows your blood vessels and triggers a small burst of adrenaline, which raises your blood pressure for a short period of time, usually somewhere between 30 minutes and 3 hours after you drink it. On top of your body's own natural morning surge from cortisol and adrenaline already rising as you wake up, adding caffeine right on top can stack one spike directly on another. Picture two waves arriving at the beach at the exact same moment instead of one after another. The combined splash is bigger than either wave alone. This is exactly why official measurement guidelines specifically tell people to avoid caffeine for at least 30 minutes before checking their blood pressure. If caffeine can throw off a single reading that much, imagine what it's doing to your body's overall morning pattern, especially if you're someone whose morning surge already runs high. I had a patient, a retired school teacher I'll call Marjorie, who checked her blood pressure the moment she finished her first cup of coffee every single morning. Her numbers were consistently the highest reading of her entire day. We didn't change her medication, we simply moved her coffee. She started drinking water first, eating a little breakfast, and waiting about an hour before her coffee and before checking her pressure. Her morning numbers came down noticeably, without a single change to her prescriptions. I'm not telling you coffee is dangerous. For most people, moderate coffee is perfectly fine, and some research even links it to certain health benefits. I'm telling you that timing matters. Let your body settle into the day first. Drink a glass of water when you wake up, since mild dehydration overnight can also affect your blood pressure and how your medications work. Then, once you've been up and moving for a little while, enjoy your coffee. Small shift, real difference. I'd love to know, when you check your own blood pressure at home, is it usually right after your first cup of coffee? A lot of people tell me yes, without ever realizing that single habit might be quietly inflating the very number they're worried about. If that's you, try moving your coffee back by even 30 minutes and see what your numbers look like after a week. Small experiments like that can teach you more about your own body than almost anything else. There's one more piece worth mentioning here, because I don't want to give coffee all the blame. Caffeine also hides in places people don't expect: in certain teas, in some over-the-counter pain relievers, in energy drinks, even in chocolate. If your mornings include more than one of these, the combined effect on your blood pressure can be bigger than you'd guess from any single source alone. It's worth reading a label every once in a while, just to know what you're actually taking in. Now let's talk about something that surprised even me when I looked closely at the research, because it goes against what a lot of people have been told for years. Many patients believe there's a single perfect time of day to take their blood pressure medication, and that getting it wrong somehow puts them in danger. I understand why. For years, some smaller studies suggested that taking blood pressure medicine at night, right before bed, might protect the heart better than taking it in the morning. It made sense on paper. Your blood pressure naturally dips at night, so the thinking was, why not have your medication working hardest while you sleep? But then came a much larger, more carefully designed study called the TIME study, following over 21,000 people for more than 5 years. And what they found was reassuring, honestly. There was no meaningful difference in heart attacks, strokes, or cardiovascular deaths between people who took their pills in the morning and people who took them at night. A separate large trial presented at a major European cardiology conference confirmed the same thing. Timing by itself, morning versus evening, doesn't appear to change your risk. So what's the actual mistake here? It's not choosing the wrong time of day. The real mistake is inconsistency. Taking your pill at 7 in the morning on Monday, skipping it Tuesday because you were rushed, then taking it at noon on Wednesday. Your blood pressure medication works by keeping a steady, even level of protection in your bloodstream. Think of it like watering a garden. A plant does best with regular, predictable watering. It struggles when it gets flooded one day and forgotten the next. I think of a longtime patient, a retired mechanic named Walter, who was convinced his medication had stopped working after 15 good years. When we looked closer, his morning routine had changed. He'd started helping care for his grandchildren 3 mornings a week, and in the rush of getting them ready for school, his own pill sometimes got taken late, sometimes forgotten completely until lunchtime. His blood pressure wasn't failing him. His routine had quietly changed underneath him. We didn't switch his medication. We simply built a plan. He now keeps his pills next to his coffee maker, something he touches every single morning without fail, and he set a phone alarm as a backup. Within a month, his numbers were steady again. This is something I wish more people understood because I know how confusing it can feel scrolling through health articles online. One article tells you evening dosing is better for your heart. Another tells you morning is better. Meanwhile, you're standing in your kitchen holding a pill bottle, unsure what to believe. I want you to feel settled about this, not more anxious. The large, well-designed research we have today points to the same honest conclusion. What matters most isn't the clock, it's the calendar. Taking your medication every single day at a time you can realistically stick to for years, not weeks, is worth more than chasing an hour that might offer a theoretical edge. So here's my honest advice. Pick a time that fits naturally into your life, morning or evening, whichever you're more likely to remember every single day, and stick with it. Talk with your doctor if you're thinking about changing when you take it, especially if you're on medications that can cause dizziness, since taking those right before getting out of bed in the morning can combine with that standing blood pressure drop we already talked about. But don't lose sleep over morning versus evening. Consistency is the real medicine here. Now let's move to something that happens at the breakfast table, something that seems harmless but quietly works against everything else you're doing right. I want you to think about your blood vessels like a garden hose. When there's too much salt in your bloodstream, your body holds onto extra water to help dilute it. That extra fluid means more volume moving through your blood vessels, which is a lot like turning up the water pressure inside that hose. Over time, that increased pressure pushes against the artery walls, and that's a big part of why sodium and blood pressure are so closely connected. Here's what surprises people. It's rarely the salt shaker on the table that's the real problem. It's what's already sitting on your breakfast plate before you even pick up the shaker. A lot of classic American breakfast foods are quietly loaded with sodium: bacon, sausage, ham, canned biscuits, instant oatmeal packets, breakfast cereals, even bread itself. Add a slice of processed cheese or a spoonful of certain condiments, and a single breakfast can carry more sodium than you'd expect for an entire meal, sometimes close to what health guidelines recommend for the whole day. I remember a patient, a grandmother I'll call Rosa, who ate what she called a light breakfast every single day. 2 strips of bacon, a slice of toast with butter, and a small glass of tomato juice. She genuinely believed this was a modest, healthy meal, and in a lot of ways it felt that way to her. Small portions, nothing fried in heavy oil. But when we added it up, that breakfast alone was carrying a surprising amount of sodium, especially with the tomato juice, which many people don't realize can be quite high in salt. We didn't ask Rosa to give up flavor. We simply helped her swap a few things: fresh tomato slices instead of tomato juice, turkey bacon or a boiled egg instead of regular bacon, herbs, pepper, and a squeeze of lemon instead of extra salt on top. Within a few weeks of home monitoring, her morning numbers had dropped several points, and she told me her food actually tasted brighter, not blander, once she stopped relying on salt to carry the flavor. Here's my practical advice for your own breakfast table. Read the label on anything packaged: cereal, bread, breakfast meats, and look specifically for the sodium number, not just the calories. Choose fresh eggs, fresh fruit, plain oats, or whole grain toast over heavily processed breakfast items when you can. And if you do enjoy a small amount of bacon or sausage now and then, that's all right. Life should still have some joy in it. Just try not to make it a daily habit, and balance it out with potassium-rich foods like bananas, oranges, or spinach, which actually help your body handle sodium more easily. How old are you, and what does your usual breakfast look like? I genuinely love to hear it in the comments because I think a lot of us grew up believing certain breakfast foods were simply what breakfast was supposed to be: bacon, toast, maybe some juice, without ever questioning it. There's no shame in that. Most of us were never taught to read a nutrition label growing up. The goal isn't to feel guilty about the last 40 years of breakfasts. The goal is just to start today a little differently. I also want to mention something that surprises people almost every time I bring it up. It's not only about what you eat at breakfast, but what you drank the night before. A salty dinner the evening before can still be affecting your blood volume and your morning blood pressure the next day, since it can take your kidneys a while to process and clear that extra sodium. So if your mornings are consistently high, it's worth glancing backward at last night's dinner too, not just at what's on your plate this morning. Now, this next one I saved for later on purpose because I think it's the most overlooked mistake of all 6, and it ties every single thing we've talked about together. It's rushing. I mean that in the most literal sense. Waking up to an alarm, feeling behind before your feet even hit the floor, and moving through those first 20 minutes in a low-grade state of urgency, checking the clock, checking your phone, checking the news, rushing to get dressed, rushing to get out the door. Remember what we talked about earlier, that natural morning surge driven by cortisol and adrenaline rising as you wake up? Those same stress hormones rise even further when you feel rushed, anxious, or overwhelmed. Your body genuinely cannot tell the difference between "I'm late for an appointment" and "there is danger nearby." Either way, it responds the same way, tightening blood vessels and speeding up your heart. Stacked on top of the natural morning surge that's already happening, a rushed, stressful morning can push your blood pressure noticeably higher right during the exact window when your risk for heart attack and stroke is already at its highest point of the entire day. I think about a longtime patient, a retired father named George, who told me his mornings felt like controlled chaos for years. Alarm, coffee, news on the television with the volume up, rushing through pills, rushing to let the dog out. His home blood pressure readings, taken right in the middle of that routine, were consistently his worst numbers of the day, even though his evening readings looked good. We didn't overhaul his whole life. We made his mornings 10 minutes longer and quieter. He set his alarm 10 minutes earlier. He turned off the news until after breakfast. He sat for those first few minutes instead of springing into motion. He took a short, slow walk around the block, which research consistently shows can help lower blood pressure and improve how well your blood vessels respond throughout the day. 10 minutes. That's genuinely all it took to change the entire tone of his morning, and his numbers followed. I understand this one might feel harder to change than the others. A busy morning isn't always a choice. Some of you are caring for a spouse. Some of you are helping raise grandchildren. Some of you simply have a life full of responsibilities that don't pause just because your blood pressure would prefer a calmer start to the day. I'm not asking you to redesign your entire schedule. I'm asking you to protect just 10 quiet minutes somewhere in that first hour, even if it has to happen after the school drop off or after the dog walk rather than before it. The goal isn't a perfectly peaceful morning. The goal is simply a few minutes where your body isn't sprinting before it's even had breakfast. Which of these 6 changes surprised you the most? I ask because, in my experience, it's different for everyone. Some people are shocked to learn their coffee timing matters. Others had no idea a rushed morning could raise their numbers as much as a poor diet could. Whichever one caught your attention, that's probably the one worth starting with this week. So here's what I want you to picture as your new morning, if you're willing to try it. You wake up. You sit on the edge of the bed for a slow minute before standing. You stand up carefully, holding something steady if you need to. You drink a glass of water. You sit quietly in a supported chair, feet flat on the floor, and you check your blood pressure the correct way. No talking, no phone, arm at heart level, 2 readings, 1 minute apart. You take your medication at the same time you always do, keeping it next to something you touch every day so you never forget. You eat a breakfast that's light on salt and rich in real food. You wait a little while before your coffee, and somewhere in there, even 5 or 10 minutes, you move your body gently, a short walk, some light stretching, anything that isn't rushing. None of this requires new equipment. None of this requires a new prescription. It requires about 10 extra minutes and a little bit of intention in a part of the day most of us have been running through on autopilot for our entire lives. I want to be honest with you about something important. None of these 6 changes are a cure. I would never tell you that fixing your morning routine alone will erase high blood pressure, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I promised that. Blood pressure is influenced by genetics, by other health conditions, by medications, by so many things working together. But research consistently shows that the morning hours carry real, measurable risk, and that small, correctable habits during that window can meaningfully support everything else you and your doctor are already doing. So if you've been feeling discouraged, wondering why your numbers won't budge even though you're doing everything right, I hope this gives you something hopeful to hold on to. Maybe it was never about doing more. Maybe it was about paying attention to those first 20 minutes, the part of the day nobody ever taught us to think about. Let me leave you with a short summary because I know that was a lot to take in. Measure your blood pressure the right way, sitting, supported, quiet, arm at heart level. Rise slowly from bed instead of jumping up. Let your body settle before your first cup of coffee. Stay consistent with your medication rather than chasing a perfect hour. Watch the hidden sodium in your breakfast, and even in the night before, and protect a few unhurried minutes at the start of your day instead of launching straight into rushing. None of these require a gym membership. None of these require giving up the foods or routines you love forever. They simply ask you to shift the first 20 minutes of your day just slightly with a little more awareness than before. And I've seen again and again how much that small shift can matter. Before you go, I want you to think back to the very first thing we talked about today, that hidden morning surge, driven by hormones rising the moment you wake up. We touched on why it happens, but we didn't fully explain something else connected to it, something just as important. There's a reason some people's morning surge is mild and barely noticeable, while other people's is severe enough to significantly raise their risk. It has to do with how stiff or flexible your blood vessels have become over the years, and there are specific research-backed ways to help keep those vessels more flexible as you age. Before I go, I want to say one more thing, because I think it matters more than any single tip in this video. You are not failing at this. High blood pressure is not a personal weakness, and it's not something you brought on yourself through carelessness. It's a combination of genetics, aging, and everyday habits that nobody ever sat down and taught most of us properly. The fact that you're here, watching, learning, asking questions, already puts you ahead of where you were yesterday. Take these 6 changes one at a time if that feels more manageable. Start with whichever one felt the most familiar to you, the one where you thought, that's me, that's exactly what I do every morning. Give it a week, watch your own numbers, let your own body show you the proof, because that's always more convincing than anything I could say in a video. That's exactly what I want to walk you through next, because understanding your blood vessels is really understanding the foundation of your entire cardiovascular health. I'll see you there.